Marcus Miller, in 1967, you were 8 years old. This was the first festival of Montreux. In 1967, what were you doing?
Let's see, 1967, yeah, I was 8 years old, and I was dreaming about becoming a baseball player, right? I'm from a musical family. My father's a musician, his father's a musician, musicians all in my family, but I was going to be a baseball player. And a couple of years after that, I decided maybe I need to follow in the rest of my family's footsteps and become a musician. But in 1967, I was trying to be Willie Mays.
As an 8-year-old child of that time, what was music for you?
Music for me was the first language. My father was a musician, so I was hearing music before I was hearing people talk. You know, he played every day and he played in the church on Sundays. Music was a way of life in my family. You know, my grandfather, the father of my father, he was a minister, so we would all go to church on Sunday in the morning, and in the afternoon we would all congregate down in the basement of the church and perform for each other and basically share music. So music was very much a part of my life.
There is always a historical division, let's say, between the gospel and the blues, spiritual and more like part of the blues. As a child or during your youth, did you feel these two worlds as separate or rather uniting themselves?
When I was young, my father and grandfather, they were involved in an African Episcopal church, which was started by Marcus Garvey in the 1920s. So essentially it was a West Indian version of the Episcopal Church. So it wasn't gospel. So it was very much almost like Catholic church music. My father played the huge organ with the pipes and all that. And I remember one day my father took us to visit another church, and they had drums and they had rhythm. It was a gospel church. And I remember going crazy because I had never heard that sound in church before. But for me, there was a mental division between gospel and secular black music, but the music was very much the same. That's what allowed Ray Charles to go back and forth. That's what allowed Aretha Franklin to go back and forth, because musically, the message in the music is the same. It's just the words and the intent is different.
How did your folk take it? For instance, how did your folk view, for instance, blues and the music that was aside from the church music?
My father played Bach, Beethoven, and hymns, Brahms, Haydn, and my mother played Ray Charles records. And my father didn't have a problem with Ray Charles. My mother didn't have a problem with Beethoven. So it was very nice, my environment as I was growing up.
For many years, this music was sort of regarded by many as, you know, the blues, the jazz, rock was sort of non-recognized, officially non-recognized music. And you probably have heard that now the Memory of the World of the UNESCO has recognized the Montreux Jazz Festival archives as part of the memory of the world. Yes. What is your feeling about it? Do you think this recognition is useful for an artist?
I think so, but I also feel like any art form, when it first comes to be, people are slow to recognize it as legitimate. And it's just a matter of time, you know. When you hear Mahalia Jackson now, and you're a contemporary gospel artist, it sounds like classic gospel, and it's the oldest gospel that you know. But when Mahalia Jackson first presented her music, the religious people at that time thought it was heresy. They were like, this is the music of the devil. Now, Mahalia Jackson is the most conservative gospel music there is, right? It's the same with swing music. If you're a modern jazz musician, swing music, Dixieland music is like, you know, it's like the basis of jazz. It's the classic music. But when swing music first came to Europe, they thought it was savage. You know, they were like, what is this? It's like jungle music, you know? Now it's very, very sophisticated to hear when you hear swing music.
In the 70s, when you're a young boy, what was your feeling towards the recognition of the music? Did you feel that the music was already officially recognized or generally recognized as a classical, as much as a classical music?
As a young boy, I grew up in an African-American environment. Soul music was it wasn't even a matter of recognition, because it was our life. It was the description of our times. So it never even occurred to me that anyone would look at it and have the right to judge it, because it was the soundtrack of our life. That never even occurred to me.
Mm-hmm. And did your generation, you were born in '59, so your generation, the new generation after the war, did you have to suffer from segregation in America?
I grew up in New York, in the North.
Mm-hmm.
So although, from the time I was born till my mid-teens, there was still, segregation for a while, and certainly racism. In the North, it wasn't so apparent. When I would travel down to visit my relatives in the South, you could feel it a little bit more. There was still very much this segregation. In the North, it was just, some of the older people would try to treat you differently. Some of the older white people would treat you differently. Some of the older blacks would tell you, be careful of the white people because they can be very racist. But you didn't see it as much. It wasn't so obvious as a young person in the North.
You never suffered from it personally?
No, just little things. You don't know why you didn't get chosen to play on this team as a young person trying to play sports. Why did they not choose me? I'm as good as the rest of these guys, and little subtle things like that. Or when you told someone that you would like to go to the university, they might laugh at you and, oh, that's a nice idea, but it probably won't happen. You get little things like that, but nothing as overt.
But that's not so little to me. I mean, that's a bit shocking when you say it like that,
But when they're hitting you with fire hoses and dogs,
that's another thing.
it's a little less overt.
So, being a young man in this environment with church music, what pushed you yourself to go on your own and to start music yourself?
As a youngster, you look for something that can set you apart. I mean, of course, you want to be part of the group, but you also want to find something that makes you feel special. And when I played music for people and I saw the reaction that you get when you can touch people with music, I immediately knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I had so much support from my family because everyone in my family has done the same thing. So it was a very natural discovery for me. At the age of 13, 14, I think I pretty much knew that this was what I was going to do.
What was your first instrument?
I started on the piano with my father, very young, but it was nothing formal. He would show me a couple of things and I would play. At the age of 8, they offered a wooden wind instrument that's called a recorder. And it sounds like a flute, and it's just a basic instrument for young people to begin to, discover music. At the age of 10, because I was already playing the recorder, they offered me the clarinet, which is kind of the next step. I played the clarinet at 10. At 12, my teacher offered me the saxophone as well, because the saxophone is similar to the clarinet.
Are you going to play it tonight? Are you going to play saxo tonight?
I think I will probably play the bass clarinet, which is the version of the clarinet that I play these days. And but I wanted to play R&B and soul music, right? I was very much a fan of Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5 and Sly and the Family Stone and these groups that were popular in the early 70s. So I picked up an electric bass at one point and I played the first couple of notes and I said, here we go.
Why the bass rather than the other guitar?
Because in the black music in the 70s, the bass was the center of the music. It was Motown, it was Isaac Hayes, it was all these songs that had very, very prominent bass lines. The songs were basically built on the bass lines. The bass was much, much louder in some of these records than the guitar or even the drums sometimes. So I just wanted to be in the middle of everything, and it seemed like the bass was right there.
And it's amazing to hear the sounds, the various sounds you produce with your bass guitar. Just incredible. Now, what made you approach the great artists of that time who wanted to play with you? How did it all start?
I'm born and raised in New York, so that's an advantage when you want to start trying to break into the music scene. There's a lot of people who come from St. Louis, or they come from Detroit, or they come from Chicago or Minneapolis, and they have to finish school, then they have to move to New York. They have to find a way to pay for their apartment or whatever they get, and then they have to begin to meet people to try to break in to the music scene. For me, because I lived in New York, I stayed home with my mother and father. Even in high school, I was beginning to meet people. By the time I was 16 or 17 years old, I was already working pretty steadily in New York. I went on the road with a couple of artists. A flautist named Bobby Humphrey. I went on the road with her at the age of 16 or 17. And Lenny White was in my neighborhood, and I met him, and I went on the road with him. And then it becomes word of mouth. People say, hey, there's a new young guy, you know, that you might want to check out. By the time I was 21, I felt like a veteran. And Miles Davis called me when I was 21, and he said he had heard about me, and he was going into the studio, and he would like me to meet him at the studio.
How was it working with him? Was it difficult?
At first, you're just very, very intimidated because I'm 21 years old. At that time, maybe he's 64, 65 years old, and he's already a legend. You know, he's like a deity for jazz. So at first, you don't even know what you're going to say to him, you know. But after a while, you recognize that he's a human being, and you recognize that he speaks English, and you recognize that you can communicate with him. And eventually, it was a beautiful thing. It was beautiful to be in his presence. It was amazing to hear the stories that he would tell. It was amazing to see how he thought about music and how he felt about the reaction to his music. It was an incredible experience.
By the early 80s, you came to Montreux for the first time, to the Montreux Jazz Festival. How was it for you the first time you were here?
The first time here in Montreux, I was here with David Sanborn and Al Jarreau and Randy Crawford. It was a big kind of all-star group. And it was my first time, and I couldn't believe that a place this beautiful existed, you know. And I couldn't believe that a place this beautiful and a place this far away from the United States loved jazz so much. And it was incredible to walk around and see all these people who were really jazz aficionados, people who really knew the whole history of jazz. It was incredible. I didn't really know what Montreux was. The only thing I knew about it was there were a couple of albums that you would buy that said Live in Montreux, right? And I said, okay, I don't know where that is, but I love Billy Cobham, I love John Scofield, and I'm going to buy this album. But when I got here and realized it's a beautiful place with people who love music, and it was directed by this guy who's this incredible guy, Claude Nobbs, who knows so much of the history and loves so much of the stories of jazz, it was an incredible experience.
Do you remember your first contact with Claude Nobbs?
My first contact with Claude probably was in 1981 when I came here for the first time. But you know, he was just running, you know, just making sure everything was going well. So it was a very quick introduction. But I became friends in the States with Quincy Jones. And so I came back to Montreux a couple of years later, and I was at the Chateau, the famous Chateau, and I was there with Quincy Jones. And Quincy made a proper introduction between me and Claude. And from that point, we really got to know each other, and it was really beautiful to know him too.
For you, when you come back in 2013 now, how do you feel? Claude is not here anymore. Do you feel that there is a fundamental change, or rather that, in fact, the story of Claude continues beyond him?
I'll tell you, you know, when Miles passed, you know, it was very sad. It was incredibly sad. 3 months later, I'm driving in the car, and Miles Davis's music comes on the radio, and I forget that he's gone, you know, because so much of him is included in his music. His spirit is right there in the music. I could talk to him. I was talking to the radio, you know, when I was listening to it. And it's the same thing with Claude. You know, you come here, and you forget that he's gone, because the spirit is here. Everything that happens here at this festival carries Claude's spirit. So you have to keep reminding yourself that he's gone. And that's what every artist, I think, hopes, that what they create will carry them and allow them to live forever. And I think it's truly the case here in Montreux.
Marcus Miller, what are your dreams for the next years to come for you musically? What do you wish to do next?
Musically, man, I'm just hoping to continue to communicate with people. You know, I got named by UNESCO an artist for peace a couple of weeks ago, and I'm looking forward to you know, traveling around the world to places in Africa, places in Asia, places in the United States, and communicating with young people, making sure they know the history of music making sure they recognize that we are all so similar. You know, we have so much in common, even though people try to separate us. And I think music is a great way to spread that message. You know, we play for people in parts of the world where we don't speak the language, but after we finish playing, everyone feels united, everyone feels like a family. And I think that's the first step to communication. So I'm looking forward to using music to help spread the love.
Marcus Miller, thank you very, very much.
My pleasure, thank you.